Attention, Sergeant on deck!
As always, shadows lay heavy on Umbara, cloaking the planet in an eternal night. Vast bioluminescent jungles extended to the south as far as the eye could see, stalked by all manner of nightmarish predators, some of which remained unknown even to the locals. It was night. Well, it was always night on Umbara, but this was true night, when this part of any normal planet would be growing dark after hours of some level of sunlight. Umbara was not a normal planet, however, and night here only meant that on most days, things simply got quieter. But this wasn't like most days either. The sound of intermittent blaster fire in the distance had been a constant background to life on Umbara for weeks now, and the night was shattered every few minutes by the sound of some distant explosion. As the battle raged on in the distance, Nus watched from the balcony of the tower that served as the barracks for his company. He hadn't chosen to fight in the battle, of course. He had been effectively born into the army, raised by and fought to die for the rulers he never had or would ever know. There are some in the galaxy that would consider this inhumane, a deprivation of rights that shouldn't be tolerated. Nus wasn't one of them, however. He was happy to fight for freedom, for justice, for the triumph of what he had been raised from birth to see as right. The rest of his squad felt the same way. 7 others were present in the room with Nus, men with whom he had trained since he could walk. As he mused on the battle, an 8th walked in, and the others eagerly turned in anticipation of news of the battle. The new arrival was Crost, the sergeant of the squad, and he addressed his squad mates almost immediately.
The battle's heading our way, comrades. We'll be under siege soon. Arm up!
Crost needed to say no more. Before he had finished speaking, his squad mates were already securing their armor, reloading their blasters, and running maintenance on their helmets. Nus had been waiting for his moment. He was already ready to go. With his armor already on, all he needed to do was to put on his helmet, ensure that its gas filtration systems were operational, and run a last-minute check on his blaster. As he carried out these final steps, he responded to Crost with a question.
Where are we getting marching orders from this time, Crost? Any room for advancement in the event of incompetent superiors?
Crost laughed.
Doubtful. Orders are coming direct from General Aliatar. The Rutai itself is handing out the management of this siege. We can't afford any slip-ups here.
By this point, the men of the squad were all set for combat. Crost gave them a silent gesture and they immediately formed up, something that they'd had to do so often since birth that it had become a matter of instinct. As he prepared his troops to march, the sergeant of the squad barked out a rallying call in hopes of raising morale.
For freedom! For Umbara! For the Confederacy!
The whole squad raised their fists in the air as one, and then Nus's squad moved out. Nus's squad exited the turbo lift as soon as the doors opened at the base of their tower, marching out into a courtyard that had been turned into a mustering ground for the company. Their tower was one of many, part of a vast defense network integrated into a thick durasteel wall that encircled the entire capital. This courtyard lay on the edge of the city proper, a forest of tall, gleaming skyscrapers that only grew taller as they approached the city center. The capital was still inhabited as there had been no opportunity for the Rutai, the ruling council of Umbara, to organize an evacuation. Of course, even if there was time, it likely wouldn't have happened regardless. Umbarans of all castes considered danger an opportunity, a chance to move up through the rigid social structures of their homeworld. Nus joined his fellow Umbaran soldiers in formation as Captain Frost addressed his company.
The Rutai has ordered that we deploy along the city gates to reinforce the main army against the Jedi advance. You may be rookies, but you know the drill here. You fight and win, or you fight and die. The Jedi and their vet-grown slaves aren't a match for the least of the Umbarans. You'll either prove me right in this endeavor, or be shot, either by the enemy or by me if you try to desert. So do not...
But Frost was cut off mid-speech by a thunderous explosion and the sound of blaster fire from the direction of the gates. Screams could be heard and more explosions followed as smoke began to billow from the now ruined gate complex. Republic Y-Wings, with Umbaran fighters in pursuit, launched a lightning attack on the city center, bombing military and civilian targets alike. The ensuing explosions were deafening, or would have been were it not for the sound dampening tech in Nus's helmet. It was at that moment that the gas kicked in. Nus's helmet and the helmet of all other Umbaran soldiers in the city was suddenly flooded by a cocktail of gas on a signal from General Eliatar. Nus felt a sudden sense of strength as the gases had the desired effect on his system. He became filled with a sort of berserker rage, and one thought blocked out all others from his mind. It was time to kill some clones. The Umbarans needed no further orders. The company broke into several smaller formations and tore off toward the gates, heedless of fires or falling debris from damaged buildings. As civilians cowered on the side of the roads, the brave soldiers of Umbara marched out to the defense of the capital, their hearts pounding and their blasters armed. Nus had trained for battle for his entire life, but when he finally reached it, even he, in the midst of his battle rage, stopped to take in the scene. No training exercise, he thought, could have prepared anyone for the sheer ruin that stood before him. What used to be a major thoroughfare was now a war zone, clogged with burning debris and blasted corpses. Umbaran soldiers crouched on the sides of the roads and in side streets, firing at the attackers that were advancing through the clouds of smoke. At the sight of the enemy, of the hordes of the white and orange armored clone troopers entering the capital and opening fire on any Umbarans in range, the lust for battle once more took hold over Nus's mind. He got behind the wreckage of a crashed airspeeder, raised his blaster rifle and opened fire, his armor absorbing the kickback from his weapon as it hurled energy bolt after energy bolt into the advancing clone company. Some hit their targets, burning holes through plastoid and flesh alike with a brief shower of sparks. The clones fired back, and all around Nus his comrades fell too. As his brothers in arms died around him, Nus's only response was to fight harder. The battle for the capital at this stage was at the point of stalemate, though Nus was ignorant of this, focusing only on whatever clone had the misfortune of walking into his rifle's targeting reticule. He ignored all surrounding circumstances, be they time, or the screams of comrades, or even blaster bolts aimed at his head. All that mattered was lining up his shot and taking it, a cycle that he repeated again and again as the night wore on. His concentration wasn't broken until, once more, the screech of approaching Y-wings was heard. For a moment, the clones pulled back, but the Umbarans did so as well, ducking behind the cover of buildings as the bombers came in for another pass. For a moment, they zipped over the streets of the capital, swerving out as they approached the city center and heading back into the sky. Then the bombs hit, and the city was rocked once more by explosions. Nus was much closer to the blast this time, and no sound dampening tech could truly eliminate the terrific roar of the concussion bombs as they collided with buildings and shattered them like glass. The building that Nus had been using for cover was hit. Before he could as much as react, burning debris was raining down on him and his squad as the structure crumbled. When the collapse stopped, Nus clawed his way up through the rubble, his helmet broken. No other survivors from his squad were in sight. Bits of their mangled corpses could be seen poking up through the debris, some of which burned still. The explosion had deafened him, and in this way, his attention wasn't drawn back to the battle until a blaster bolt flew past his exposed head. He turned and instinctively returned fire as the clones charged once more. Nus fired back, blasting down several clones and attracting the attention of a clone lieutenant, who immediately called for the rest of his platoon.
Alright boys, survivors, line them up!
Some of the other clones rushed to the lieutenant's side, but Nus had backup of his own. He unclipped a plasma grenade from his belt, a last-ditch weapon given to all Umbaran soldiers for delicate situations. He hurled it at his opponents, who were scattered by the blast as it fulfilled its purpose. Nus charged from cover, no longer caring about surviving the battle, finishing off his opponents as they tried to reorient themselves. The clone lieutenant saw what was happening, however, and once more activates his comlink.
CL-7499, requesting backup.
Nus silenced him with a blaster bolt between the eyes, but as the lieutenant fell, aid did indeed arrive. Nus froze as the sound of a new voice, speaking with a clipped Coruscanti accent.
This is General Obi-Wan Kenobi. I have engaged the enemy.
Nus turned in horror to see the cloaked shape of General Kenobi charging toward him, a meter-long beam of blue light emerging from his right fist. Nus opened fire, but Kenobi handily deflected the bolts with his lightsaber and extended his left hand toward his opponent. Nus felt the air harden around him as he was hurled backwards by an unseen force, his weapon falling from his grasp. As his head collided with the street, his last thoughts were scattered, and the Umbara night darkened to pure blackness. So guys, I hope you enjoyed our story about Umbara. Now, as with all the stories of this caliber that we make, these aren't based on fact, and they're only based on the information we have about the battle. So it's just a bit of fun. It's nothing canonical or anything like that. So I hope you enjoyed it regardless. And I want to thank everybody who made this possible, including my writer Grievous1138, the artist Star Commander, and of course, the man who does the clone voices himself, Frankster5261. So make sure you send them a nice message on Discord and check out their links in the description below. Anyways guys, as always, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.
Hello there, and have a happy landing. It's over, Umbarans. I have the high ground.